So, welcome back to World News Today. I'm Nisha Pillay. Now, the victory of world motorsport boss Max Mosley in his privacy action against a British newspaper. We've been telling you about it, and it has triggered a debate over what the public interest should be in such cases. Should newspapers be allowed to reveal facts about the private lives of public figures if they're deemed to undermine that person's moral standing and influence? The judge said no. Or should the right of the individual to privacy be upheld at all costs? Well, with me to chew over the issues, our social commentator Mal Fletcher, who joins us from our Oxford studio, and Matthew Syed, columnist with the Times newspaper. Welcome to you both.
Hi, thanks.
So I'm going to ask you first, Matthew, what do you reckon? Max Mosley's sadomasochistic proclivities, are they anyone's business but his own?
Personally, I don't really give a stuff whether Mosley dresses up as a Nazi or a Russian or a French maid, whether he enjoys being spanked or spanking another person. The key issue for me, was it consensual? Did it take place behind closed doors? I don't think either of those facts are in dispute, and therefore I don't think that his behaviour disbars him from the job that he's doing. The only issue with regard to his job is he doing it well, not what his private sexual preferences are.
So was he right to win that privacy action that he brought against the newspaper?
Seems to me that's a separate question, whether or not the public has a right to know. And I don't see how the public interest is served by knowing about whether he spanks people in his private life. OK, very clear, Matthew. I'm going to ask Mal Fletcher that question too. Do you agree with what you've heard? The public really doesn't have a right to know what he gets up to behind closed doors.
Well, I think we don't want to live in a paparazzi culture, you know, where all the private details of a public figure's life are open to public scrutiny all the time. But having said that, we can't park our private values in the car space at work. We carry them with us. They do affect our decisions in the public sphere. And when you represent a huge sporting constituency that covers millions of adults and children, I think people want to know that your values are based on transparency, consistency, integrity, and a responsibility for the next generation.
So we've just heard that Mal says he is a public figure, and so the public needs to know. You say no. Is there any case in which you would think that somebody, say a prime minister or a religious figure, is so important that the public does need to know? Well,
I think it is right to say that if a public figure is behaving in private in a way that contradicts their public utterances, so say for example a politician was saying it was horrendous for anyone to use prostitutes, and in their private life we're using prostitutes, then there would be a public interest, because you would be able to recognize.
Most politicians are unlikely to be saying we shouldn't use prostitutes. Well, it's kind of taken for granted in society that it's not a good thing. Most politicians aren't going to say we shouldn't go in for sadomasochism. It's just generally considered to be that that's the case. So well, if you haven't made any public utterances on this issue, is it OK to out someone?
No, certainly not. I don't think that even if it was a prime minister or a monarch or anything else, the key tenet of liberalism is you should be allowed to do what you want so long as it doesn't harm somebody else, so long as that they are consenting to what you are doing with them. All of these people consented, and I don't see how the public interest is served. I don't doubt the public is interested in the issue in the same way that the public would be interested in seeing a nude photo of the Queen. But there is no public interest served. The argument is not taken forward, and that seems to me to be the same whether it is Mosley, a politician, or the Queen of England. I do not see the public interest.
So, Mal Fletcher, what is the public interest then?
Well, I'm not sure that it is totally in the public interest to go through all the sordid details, but I do believe that although Mr Mosley won the case today in court, he may have lost something more important, which is the trust and the respect that are the key currencies of leadership, especially in an area like the International Racing Association, where there's so much need for diplomacy and so much need for cultural sensitivity. So I think actually it does impact on his job, though it is very sad the way it came about.
But he wouldn't have lost that trust, if indeed he has done, if it hadn't been exposed by the newspaper, would he?
Yes, but the fact is that it was. And it's sad that it happened the way it did, and perhaps the News of the World went way too far with it. But I do think that there's an issue there of trust in leadership that has been compromised. And in an age where we need quality leadership in communities, certainly where young people are concerned, they need examples of leadership they can trust around the world. I think this whole issue of private values needs to get more into the debate.
Well, that's a valid point, isn't it, Matthew? You need to get people who are willing to stand up and take on leadership roles. And it's an intolerable price, isn't it, that they would have to pay? Well,
you're right. The practical implications of this is that people might feel less likely to go into a public life if their private lives are going to be exposed. But the judgment today actually leads to a slightly higher bar for the media to get over if they want to reveal private details. The judge was very explicit in his recommendations. He didn't feel that there was any public interest served by the revelation of private sexual details. And, you know, the Nazi...
So is anything out of bounds then? I mean, clearly S&M is okay these days. What is it that he might have done in privacy that would not have been okay, do you think?
Well, broken the law, rape, embezzlement. I think if he did something with someone and they consented to it and he was not breaking the law, it doesn't seem to me that there's a public interest. But your other contributor talked about...
But if he'd been very offensive, if a public figure makes really rude remarks about a different group, a minority group, is that okay?
Well, let's say, for example, Mosley had described some of the motoring organisations in his tent as useless and incompetent, but he wasn't prepared to make that case publicly, then I think there would have been a very strong public interest in disclosing that particular fact. But the other contributor has talked about trust, that Mosley somehow breached the trust of those who elected him. You made the point absolutely validly that no one would have known anything about it had the News of the World not published. But in what sense, when he took that job, was he saying to the people, I'm not going to indulge in S&M? I don't think there was any implicit requirement for Mosley or anybody else not to indulge. S&M is a private sexual behaviour in the same way that homosexuality is a private sexual behaviour. In a homophobic society...
And our attitudes have changed hugely, haven't they? I just want to bring Mal back into the discussion, Mal Fletcher. How does one safeguard one's privacy in this day and age when you're going to be on YouTube?
Well, I just want to point out in response to something Matthew said that it's not so much just the issue of sexual behaviour and consensuality and so on. I think there's also the issue of the covert lifestyle that went with it. And by his own admission, Mr. Mosley said that he kept some of these things hidden from his family for many years. So people in the public sphere can be asking themselves, I think rightly so, if he's prepared to use deception on people closest to him for so long,
Mal Fletcher.
Perhaps he may use the same deception in public and professional areas of life when it comes to moral and ethical questions. So I do think there's
Mal Fletcher, I'm sorry to intervene. Thank you so much for your contribution, and thank you to Matthew Syed too.